I've been reading stories on this page for over a year now. Why? I don't know. I'll always find myself scared at night. But look forward to the new entries every month. I thought it might be time to submit my scariest. I'm very sensitive to the spiritual world, so I have many. Okay, a few years ago, I met my current husband, Joe, during the beginning stages of his nasty divorce to his wife, Jennifer. Jennifer was raised in a Jewish family that had a lot of problems. Before they married, they lived in the downstairs apartment of Joe's father's house. His sister and her family lived upstairs. They had experienced some ghostly activity when they were children there, but it was all positive, like smelling roses throughout the house. Jennifer's brother, Andrew, had joined a devil-worshipping cult and moved to California. Eventually, he realized I was crazy and sick, so he hopped on a bus and journeyed home to Massachusetts. At every stop, one of the members was standing outside the bus, just staring at him. He made it home, but did not escape. They came to him at night, played head games, and did not allow him to let go of the devil. He was also very heavy into drugs. Joe was, and still is, a member of AA, so he invited Andrew to live with them while he tried to recover and get off the drugs. Unfortunately, Andrew couldn't, and one day he said to us, "I just want to live to see you two get married." A few weeks after their wedding, Andrew was found hanging from a tree in a nearby park. After the funeral, Joe was consoling Jennifer when he heard 3 knocks on the door. He went to answer it, but no one was there. All of a sudden, a rush of energy entered his body, and then everything went black. Joe awoke to his brother-in-law, holding him down and trying to stop him from convulsing. He had come downstairs to find out what the knocks were from. Joe and Jennifer got Andrew's wonderful leather living room set. They moved to Connecticut and split up shortly thereafter. I came along pretty quickly and also got pregnant pretty quickly as well, so we were not allowed to see the family, for they were ashamed of Joe's actions. One night, I had a nightmare of being chased by an evil and angry spirit through a house I had never seen before. I was flying from room to room, up many stairs. Finally, I went into a room where there was a child spirit on a bed, and very scared. I remember holding it while watching the spirit fly up the stairs at us. Then, I awoke. I told Joe about this because it was so vivid. He just about died. I described every room down to the wallpaper of his father's house that his sister still lives in. We were invited over shortly after. His family began to forgive him and understood his reasoning, not to mention they had a beautiful niece, granddaughter, that they did not know. When I walked in, I knew I had been there before. Amy, Joe's 7-year-old niece, said, "I knew you had blonde hair. I had a dream about you last week." Strange. A year later, I went to a psychic who I had never met before. She told me a lot of stuff about my guides and messages from them. Well, one was this. That spirit that was chasing you, it is the sibling of your boyfriend's ex-lover. And that was it. We just finally sold that dang leather furniture. I hope Andrew leaves me alone now. This is a true story that happened to me. It is one of many, and I mean many stories, that happened to me that involve spirits. It started one night. I was spending the night at my grandma's house in the spare bedroom. She has 2 spare bedrooms. One is mine, and one is my older sister Tammy's. I used to sleep in my room, but after that incident happened about a year ago, and no one died or anything. The room just went wacko from the presence of a spirit when me and my friend Damien were in it. I haven't gone in there since. So now I stay in my sister's room, since she doesn't visit as much as I do. I was laying down, looking at the white ceiling, like I always do when I can't sleep. All of a sudden, I saw a black shadow coming from the bottom of my eyes. It slowly covered my whole vision, and it turned black. It was holding my head down, so I couldn't even move. I got so scared that I swung my hand at it, and it was just like swinging at smoke. It just separated and then moved back together. The most terrifying and weirdest part of this all is that it really seemed like there were eyes, glowing red eyes, that were coming from this black shadow. The next time I met the black figure was when I was at home. I was having a sleepover with my friend Sarah in the basement. We were both on the pull-out couch, across the room from the bar. She turned and looked over, and then saw the black figure just staring at her, with glowing red eyes, and leaning up against the bar, right in front of her back. She slept facing the other way for the rest of the night. Again, I had a sleepover with Sarah in the basement. This time, I saw it. It came through the roof right above me, with its arms and legs straight out to its side, as if it was in the shape of a star. When it popped through the roof, I could see smoke come from around its body. What is this thing? Why is it following me? What does it want? Will it hurt me? And then slowly, it lowered itself towards me. I was so frightened. I didn't want to tell Sarah because she might get scared, so I pressed my head into the bed, trying to stay away. I was right in my sleeping bag, so I couldn't swat at it again. And then Sarah leaned over and asked, "What are you doing?" Then I told her, "That thing is right above me." She looked around me and saw nothing. "There's nothing there, Trisha." And I thought, how could she not see this? It's right there. How could she not see this? And then I said, "Hey, it's right there. It's right above me." She then tried to prove that there was nothing there and waved her hand over the top of me. Just as she did that, the figure jumped up and spread its arms and legs again and just popped through the roof. That was the last time that I saw that figure. I have many other stories. Most of them I'm going to submit to this page. If you have any questions, or if you want to talk to me about spirits, ghosts, or angels, email me. Odd things have always happened to my family. As a child, I was raised by my grandparents on the hoops of a reservation. There was no question to there being spirits on a reservation. My grandfather came from a long line of medicine men. Although he doesn't practice medicine, he says he remembers everything he witnessed while he was learning to practice. Something scared him to death, and some things, he says, are very comforting. He says it was a practice of good versus evil. Some ceremonies were so intense that they were physically attacked by apparitions. Large, small, white, sometimes gray or black images. He says the spirits are present all the time, as if waiting for the right moment to strike. He always said if I was harmed in any way, I shouldn't point blame to anyone or anything. He said to express in words, "You aren't getting the best of me," just loud enough for me to hear it. Even when whispered, it was a means of protection. He said sometimes late at night, family members that have passed away would come knocking at his window, mostly his brother. He said he knew when it was his brother, and when it wasn't. His brother gave him a sense of happiness or protection, but the others came with evil intentions. He said that all encounters are warnings and signs of bad things that are about to happen, or when sickness was about to fall on the family members. He said he knew when evil ones were around. When they came to his window, he would feel a cold breeze, then a strong sense of fright. Chills would overwhelm his body, and then a split second before he saw or heard anything, he would be paralyzed, completely taken over. The chills got worse, and when he would try to yell, nothing would come out. Sometimes he said he felt like he was dying and feeling every bit of it. Of course, this only time this happened was when it was pitch black in his room. Sometimes they reached in for him, from outside his window or from right underneath his bed. He said it wasn't the same feel as someone grabbing you physically. Their grasp pierced right through to the bone, much like a snake wrapping tightly around you. Only every bit of the inside would also feel constricted, right down to the bone. We always had traditional singing gourds hung up around the house. These were used for funeral wakes. Almost every time a force was present, it was through a dead family member. Even if it was just a dark shadow, the dead were used as portals to reach the livelihood of our people. He said the gourd served as a warning system. If a force entered our house, the gourds would rattle like crazy, much like an alarm system, protecting the house from theft. He said this would cause the dead to return to their resting place. It was a reminder that the person was dead, and that he was only causing distress. The evil using it had no way of evading or entering our house. If the force was strong enough, the gourds would not work. He said if that happened, we would all experience cold chills and a sense of fright. He said you'd have to feel so scared you wouldn't want to move, and that if you didn't convince yourself to move, it would only get worse, and that one person would be taken as an outlet for the family. Sickness or death would fall that person. To this day, I've never seen or experienced anything of that nature, but deep down inside, I know it's all true. I've heard the gourds go off, but never felt anything. My grandfather says they still visit him. I love my grandfather for everything he has shared with me. He says that all of this is only fair warning, and that this happens to everyone. Some just don't notice. The next time you fall or get in a fight, just think, who is really behind it all? I could go on, but I think it's best to stop here. Okay, here's a story I heard from my dad. My dad used to work at a warehouse at the Goodyear facilities in Akron, Ohio. There were stories floating around about various ghosts and whatnot associated with the various buildings in the planned campus, which, if you ever visited Akron, sprawls over a vast area. Anyway, one of these stories involved a ghost that followed you through various warehouses as you walked and was never seen, only heard. My dad was always working swing shifts at this plant, very little seniority, and so he was there at all kinds of wacky hours. One night in the winter, he was working the midnight shift in one of the supposedly haunted buildings. There was only 4 guys in this particular building, and my dad, being the rookie in the place, was given all the crappy jobs. At about 3 in the morning, my dad's supervisor instructed him to go to the 3rd floor of the building, back in the oldest part of it, to pick up some fluorescent lights, because the small storage area in the machine room was out of them, and they needed to replace a few. So, being as superstitious as you can be, my dad was sure he was gonna see a ghost in that very dark, very scary, old building. Up the dark stairs my dad went, one by one, sweat pouring off his face. Even though this part of the building was barely heated, when he finally reached the third floor, he felt a little stronger, probably adrenaline. So he bravely pushed open the door to the adjoining room between the stairwell and the storage room. This room used to be a rubber cutting room. It wasn't used for anything anymore, since manual rubber cutting was no longer done. There were a few large containers sitting around, but for the most part, the room was empty. There was a thick layer of dust covering most of the room, except for a small path where people walked to get various items from the storage room. Spiderwebs everywhere, and the occasional squeak from a disgruntled rat were just enough to give my dad the total spine chills. But he pushed on, being a man, and not supposed to be afraid of anything. He started walking across the abandoned rubber cutting room towards the storage area, when very faintly he heard footsteps behind him. Whirling around ready to fight, he peered into the dimness. Nothing was there. He assumed it was his nerves, which he had worked into a frenzy by this point, and he turned quickly, embarrassed, and continued towards the storage area, when sure enough, more footsteps. He slowed. They slowed. He sped up. They sped up. With his heart racing, he slowly turned around. Still, nothing was there. Drenched with sweat and scared nearly to tears, he bolted towards the storage room, his feet pounding heavily on the thin metal floor. The footsteps were even louder now. Every step he took, another step followed, not an echo, but right behind him. He made it to the storage room, fumbled with the lock, ran inside, and slammed the door behind him. The room was very small. All he could hear was the pounding of his heart, threatening to blow right through his chest. The only way out was the way he came. After calming down a bit and smoking about 5 cigarettes, he was feeling brave again. He grabbed a large box of lights, decided to fling open the door, and run like hell as fast as he could cover the 50 to 75 feet to the stairwell. Getting up his nerve, he grabbed the door handle. He slowly turned it. As soon as he heard the click of the latch opening, he flung open the door and sprinted towards the light in the stairwell. There were the footsteps again, closer than ever, right behind him. That's when it happened, tripping over something. He sprawled headfirst into the darkness. Total quiet met him. Darkness and quiet. He slowly rose to his feet, putting one hand behind him to help him get to his feet. Once again, the footsteps crept up behind him. That's when he finally got the guts to look in the direction where the footsteps were coming from, and what he saw astonished him. He saw an old man wearing an eye patch and had a cane in his hand. He had suspenders and overalls on, and a blue hat on that resembled Mario from Super Mario Bros. The guy only appeared for about 30 seconds, but it was long enough to notice the presence. The figure disappears. He rose to his feet and walked back to his coworkers, never telling any of them of what he found. Years later, he still tells stories about sending the new rookies up there in the middle of a dark night when all is quiet to walk across the metal floored room to get light bulbs that aren't really needed. It all started when I was about 10 or 11. This story is very true, by the way. We had moved into a new house in northeastern Wisconsin. Let me explain where my room was. There was a porch, and then the door into our house. To the left was the kitchen, to the right was the laundry room. And if you were to go straight when you entered the door, there was a staircase. it led to the attic where my room was. The staircase was not very long at all, 12 steps to be exact. When you went into the attic, there was a bathroom if you went straight. My room, if you turned left, and to the right, was a living room with a TV. One night, while I was laying in bed trying to sleep, I heard creaking up the steps. I thought it was my cat or one of the dogs, so I wasn't scared. I counted the number of steps I heard. There was 12. I noticed it sounded like a person coming up. I remembered every creak the steps made. I looked at the staircase, which I could see from where my bed was. I noticed some sort of dim light from the top step. The lights in the kitchen were off, and so was the upstairs light. I hid under the blankets, hoping for it to go away. I listened closely and heard 12 steps going down the stairs. Every night from then on, I heard the steps. One night, after I heard the steps going down the stairs, I got out of bed and looked at the bottom of the staircase. It was very dark, but I thought I could see a crumpled figure. Then a few days later, I saw a figure in white glide up the same staircase. It actually looked like a floating sheet and sort of resembled the Grim Reaper. I would start to see a lot of different types of spirits moving along the staircase. The last one I remember was a floating head that darted down the stairs. 3 years later, we moved into a new house in Indiana. One night, my mother told me that a little boy had died in the house in Wisconsin because he fell down the stairs. She didn't want to tell me when we lived there because it might frighten me. To this day, I'm still very haunted by that. Back in September of 1982, my boyfriend of 4 years named Keith and I were visiting his sister Julie, her husband, and family in Orneco, Minnesota. He was 17 and I was 21, an odd age range, but he looked every bit my age and was mature as well. Sitting up late, we were talking, and for some reason, we got on the subject of death. I asked him if he believed in the afterlife, and he said that he did not. He believed that when it was over, but he knew I believed, and I asked that in case there was an afterlife of any sort, and that if we were able, that if one of us should die before the other, that the one who died would come back and watch over the one left behind. He agreed. As time passed, Keith needed a space, and I gave it to him, reluctantly at times, to the point where we would get into heated arguments, and I would move out of his house, where we lived together with his father. In June 1983, on a windy, extremely hot Wednesday night, Keith died in a fire that consumed their trailer house. I hadn't been with Keith for about 3 months, as our breakups and makeups were getting more sporadic. I recall trying to hitchhike to his place that night, 12 miles away, but as I stood on the highway for what seemed like 45 minutes, I just wasn't getting a ride. It was strange, because I hitchhiked the highway regularly and never had a problem getting a ride within 5 or 10 minutes. But that night, it was mostly humid and so hot that within minutes of leaving my apartment to go to the highway, I was soaked with sweat, like I had just taken a shower and didn't dry off. So, I went back home. The next day, my sister contacted me, saying that Keith had died the night before. I was devastated. My whole world fell to pieces. I spent the next few days with Keith's dad at Julie's house, preparing and attending the wake. At the wake, I was alone in the viewing room with Julie, and everyone else was downstairs visiting. It was a closed coffin service, but I had written a letter to Keith and wanted to place it in the coffin. But due to the extensive damage to Keith's body in the fire, the funeral home director would not let me see him, so I decided to put the letter in the small groove between the top and bottom halves of the coffin. As I was putting it there, a gust of wind came out of nowhere. It seemed to come right from the groove where I was about to place the letter. It was so strong and sudden that I screamed. People came from downstairs to see what the matter was, and I told them I had seen a mouse. No one in their right mind would believe me, and besides, maybe it could be explained some way I could not figure out. The night before the funeral, I was having a tough time trying to sleep due to the emotional turmoil I had faced from hearing the tragic news. I couldn't stop crying, and I was absolutely devastated. Just then, I felt a cold breeze brush past my face while I was still laying down in bed and hysterically crying. I then felt the weight of the bed getting heavier, like someone else was sitting on the bed. I screamed Keith instinctively and laid up in bed. The bed instantly felt lighter, and I could have sworn I saw a small ball of light move around the room before disappearing. During the wake, I had a 110 camera and took several pictures of the coffin. These pictures I will have to retrieve from Julie, as I've gotten married 6 years ago and gave my photo album a key to her as a means of trying to let go of the past and move forward into my new life with my husband and daughter. But when I do, if I can't figure out how to scan them and get them on here, I will send them in. I believe I have something here. Also, in closing, I realize the depth of the promise we made to each other that night, just months before Keith died, and have spoken aloud, hoping I will release him if we're bound in any way, that I release him of his promise and set him free, several times in the past few years. Thank you for reading. In this story, my wife and I had moved, and we rented a 60-year-old plus house because the landlord allowed pets. My wife had misgivings about the house from the first day we viewed it, but she agreed to move in. We lived there for 6 months, August 1997 through January 1998. She had a strange feeling about the staircase, as if something bad had happened or would happen to one of us. I couldn't blame her, for the staircase was dark with no railing and carpeted so that it could be easy for someone to fall down the stairs. She also swears she heard old-time music playing in her bedroom late at night. I never heard it, and I don't believe it was our neighbors. She also said she would see people out of the corners of her eyes when she was alone. This hadn't happened to her before, and hasn't since in our new house, which we have lived in for 9 months. The strange coincidence is this. One afternoon, I was in the bathroom taking a shower when I saw movement about the size of a human move across the floor in front of the sink towards the door. I thought it was my wife, so I opened the door, but she wasn't around. About a week later, we were talking about how cold and where the house was. My wife told me, in addition to the music and odd feelings, that when she was taking a shower, she had seen movement in the front of the sink going towards the door. I told her that the same thing had happened to me. I thought that perhaps reflections off moving cars in the street in front of the house could explain the movement, but it wasn't sunny when I showered. At this point, I was freaked out, so in addition to poor insulation, bats in the attic and mice in the walls, we had ghosts. We moved out within a few months. It started when I was just a little girl. I would see things in my room at night, movement, shadows, in dark forms. I was told that it was a dream and I should not watch scary things on TV. Now that I am 29 years old and I'm not dreaming. I know this for a fact. The ghost started to intensify when I was pregnant with my first child. I was 21 and still at home. I would wake up in the night with the feeling of being watched. Afraid to open my eyes, I would anyway, and the same man would be there looking over me without an expression and cold eyes. I tried sleeping with the light on, but this did not stop it. I knew it could not be a dream because it was the same image every night. My son was born and we moved into our own place, about 8 blocks away from my home. The man did not appear for a few months, but he did eventually show himself. Frightened every night as to what I would wake up and see, my husband worked out of town during the week, so I had my best friend come stay with me. I warned her that in the night, I sometimes scream because of what I see. Hesitant at first to believe me, then the screams came, and she too was a believer. My friend eventually moved into her own place. What happened next, I can't explain. My friend has never experienced any ghosts or such, but one morning, while lying in her bed, she felt something jump up on it, like a cat would. The only thing is, she didn't have a cat. Before she knew it, she was frozen, as if someone was lying atop her and restricting her movement. The incident left as soon as it came, but she was well aware that this was an event that she could not get over. She moved shortly after. The stranger thing was that the man I'd seen for 4 years was gone. Had he been the one at her house? Did he move on with her? I will never know. I've never seen him since. My husband and I eventually bought our own home and began to move. The last night in our apartment, I awoke to at least 6 to 8 apparitions above my bed. The spooky thing was that I was pregnant with our second child. It was as if they came to say goodbye. We got settled into our new home. Incidentally, it's 3 blocks from our apartment. It was about a year before the first incident. We knew when we moved in that the lady of the house had died here. That is who I expected to see, but quite the contrary. It was a man in police dress, like you would see at a funeral or graduation. His image appeared in the mirror next to my bed. He's the only one of the many ones that I've seen here. Now I only see an image once, and never again do they appear. Some months, it is every night. In some months, none at all. Just when I think they are gone, I wake up and scream. They never touch me or try to talk to me. They just stand there and stare at me. The lights can be on or off. It does not matter. I think that my younger son is experiencing the same thing, but I do not know how to ask him without scarring him. Some nights, he sits straight up in bed and cries and points with terror on his face. I look, but there is nothing there. All I want to know is if I'll ever be able to go to sleep and be confident that I won't wake up screaming. Thank you for your time, and hopefully someone out there can relate to me. I've had numerous experiences with supernatural entities, but one that sticks out in my mind happened to my brother and I about 2 years ago. I have a cleaning service and clean many buildings at night, but the case in point occurred at a clinic in an older district of South Fort Worth. One night, my brother and I were finishing up at this clinic. I have a habit of walking through a building before we lock up to be sure everything is secure and the lights are off. My brother was in the lobby area of the clinic, preparing to leave, when I informed him I was going to check the building. There are 4 hallways in this clinic, with many examining rooms, so I proceeded to walk the building. About halfway through my walk, I heard another pair of steps about 10 foot or so behind me. I assumed it was my brother coming to help me, so I started talking to him. At the last stop of my walkthrough, there was a break room. I reached in to turn off the light of the break room and turned around, facing back towards the direction from which I had come, expecting my brother. What I turned to was not my brother, but the upper torso of a male figure, somewhat see-through and misty white. I blurted out a few choice words, and the figure was gone. After this experience, my brother as well heard many strange things as well as the figure of a female. I was talking to one of the doctors one day in the receptionist area when I noticed a picture on the wall. Instantly, I recognized one of the people in the picture with the figure I'd seen. A cold chill came over my body at this point. I pointed out the picture to the doctor and asked who this person was. The doctor stated that he was the doctor who founded the clinic in 1929 and had died in 1985. I thought to myself, I knew doctors worked a lot of overtime, but this was going to an extreme. In the mid-1980s, my wife and I bought a home in Hanover Park, Illinois. It was a neglected house, which had a hard time selling and was being rented. The owners lived in a different state, and the tenants let the place go pretty bad. We saw a lot of possibilities, and the price was right. So we moved in, and things were, to put it bluntly, bad. The place was filthy. There were spiders everywhere. The gas wasn't on in late October, and it was raining continually. So I'm sitting in the living room area questioning my sanity when I see this blob of haze, a little larger than a basketball, round in shape, start moving across the living room about 7 feet away and just sort of floats into the dining room and out the patio door. It just went through the door and out of the house. I'm like, am I seeing things now? Or was that an apparition? It was weird because I wasn't scared. It was more like, wow, what the heck was that? We finally got the place in shape, and it turned out to be a nice home. We had our first child just before moving in, and it was nice to have a place of our own. I never mentioned the apparition to my wife, lest she think I was really losing it. A few months later in the spring, other things started happening. My son, who was now a full year, would wake up in the night, laughing deliriously. My wife thought it was hilarious. I never mentioned what I'd seen to her. She couldn't figure out what was so funny. I remained tight-lipped. This happened on a regular basis for about a month. Then one day, she calls me at work in a panic, saying that Chris, our son, got out of his crib and was sitting on the floor playing with his toys. Fine, except Chris couldn't walk just yet and definitely lacked climbing skills. So how did he get out? If he tumbled out, he would have most likely have been hurt or screaming at the very least. To this day, we don't know how, and he has no recollection of the event. Other events included the TV turning on at night, a strange happening of voices in the night, strong flowery odors, a feeling my wife once described as having passed through by something, in the car shutting down in front of the house once we moved out. We sort of visited, and when we passed the front of the house, the car just shut down. It restarted with no problem, and had no problems before, or any time soon thereafter. Weird. I was dating a guy when I was 14, about 5 years ago. His house had been built over an old well. The story goes that in the early 1900s, two children were playing near this well, and the little girl fell in, and her brother tried to help, but fell in too. Their parents didn't know they were missing for a while, but by the time they got there, it was too late. Well, they moved, and another house was built over it. My boyfriend's closet was built over this well. One night, it was raining really hard, and he was playing his guitar. A bolt of lightning struck right outside his window and lit up the whole room. About 10 seconds after that happened, we heard children laughing. I looked in the corner of his room and saw two children standing there, staring at us. I just sat there and stared back. They stood there for about 30 seconds and then vanished. After that, you would find things misplaced and then find them later. He came home on several occasions to find his room messed up. He would pick it up, leave, come back, and it would be messed up again. We broke up soon after that, and I've never heard about the children again. Hey Phantoms, I just want to let you know that I'm so thankful for your appreciation, and thank you for listening to this video. Of course, we can celebrate that by actually tuning in and actually sharing this video and making sure that everybody all around social media can hear of it. I don't even know if that's even proper grammar, but we're going to use that for now. But anyway, guys, thank you so much. Thank you for actually participating and being engaged and always, filling my happiness by commenting in the comments section below and actually being there as a true and tried friend, because you guys are friends to me and you guys mean so much to me. But really, let me know in the comments section below which story you loved. It's kind of a lengthy video, obviously, but I know you guys love the lengthy videos, so hopefully you guys enjoy this one. And yeah, just let me know if you haven't, seen this channel before, what you think of it, and if you like the ghost stories and all that, then go ahead and subscribe. As for me, if you like the video, leave a like, and I'll leave you alone for you to enjoy the video. Wait, you already finished the video because you're at the end of the outro, so never mind. Guys, I love you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.